So we have the early spoilers for chapter 17 of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, and based on what we're seeing here, Jura has invaded the village, but not in the way that you might think. But yeah, we do have a few things to discuss, so of course, let's get into it. So yeah, Jura is now in the village and he's going through the bookshelves and taking in all the information that he can. And this was predicted by Kashin Koji in chapter 16 when he said that Jura might not attack the village because he doesn't want to destroy the books within the libraries, because if a fight does go off, you can assume that some Biju bombs will be fired and it might obliterate the entire village. So everyone should be safe if no one attacks him, and he also told them that they should allow him to do whatever he wants because at this point in the story, no one is strong enough to stand against Jura. So all those theories about Daemon secretly being the strongest and he's just not interested in Jura because he's not strong enough has been debunked. Though I think what's most interesting here is the origins of this 10 tails and why it's so powerful, and I think it has something to do with Shibai. Now I do want to point this out because I've seen some comments about people being confused as to why Jura wants to read books and consume information, and it goes back to what the 10 tails itself does. So as you guys know, the goal of the 10 tails is to consume the life of a planet. So this includes the chakra and energy of every living thing. But it also does consume information. This goes back to what the chakra fruit itself is, which is a lump of tremendous energy and genetic information. Now Jura is the incarnation of the 10 tails itself. That's what he stems from. So he also needs to consume an Otsutsuki and transform into a god tree to absorb all of this information. So until then, Jura has found a way to gather information by reading books, which of course is the next best way to gather data aside from consuming an entire planet. So again, if you guys want to find out why these guys, the Shinjus, do the things that they do, simply go back to the person they copied. And some of it is also the opposite as well, in the fact that the 10 tails is known as a mindless entity, while Jura seems to be very intelligent. And Sasuke is known to be very intelligent, while Hidari is of course the opposite of that. Let's just put it there. And Bug was of course a bit more timid and cowardly, and then you have the Bug Shinju, Mamushi, the opposite of that. He's a bit more aggressive and a bit more brash. And the same thing goes for Matsuri and the Ryu Shinju. So follow that blueprint and you guys will find out what you need to know. Now I did want to go back to why I think Jura is as strong as he is. And it goes back to why the 10 tails in Boruto is stronger than the one in Naruto. And I kind of missed this in my prior video that explained the 10 tails power because I didn't notice it before. But if you guys go back to the chapter titled Defection, where Amado first arrived at the village, he explained that the 10 tails in Jigen's dimension is a different specimen than the one they battled, and then goes on to say that he doesn't know where this 10 tails comes from. Now this is very interesting to me because why would he need to clarify that he doesn't know where the 10 tails comes from when it's obvious that, or it should be obvious that it's Ishiki's 10 tails and Ishiki brought it to that dimension because it's his dimension. And Amado, being as smart as he is and known about the 10 tails and the Otsuzukis to that degree, would make that logical conclusion, but for some reason he chose not to. So the most likely case, which I think makes sense, is that the writer, whether it be Ikimoto or Kodachi, was trying to imply that this 10 tails doesn't belong to Ishiki, and if that's the case, whose 10 tails is this? Now I'm sure you guys are thinking what I'm thinking, which is that this 10 tails belong to Shibai Otsutsuki, and this makes perfect sense by the way, because it somewhat fixes an inconsistency behind Ishiki's death. This goes back to the fact that when Ishiki turned to dust, the rods he used to hold down the 10 tails didn't disintegrate, which kinda doesn't make sense given the fact that when Momoshiki turned to dust or was destroyed by Boruto's Rasengan, the rods he used to pin down Naruto immediately vanished. So why is it that when Ishiki suffered the same fate to the extent that his soul got extinguished, his rods didn't disintegrate? Well, the most obvious answer to this is that Ishiki wasn't the one to pin down the 10 tails. This leads me to believe that this is the 10 tails that Shibai used to consume multiple planets over several millennia, and that explains why the Shinju are so powerful. Now, this might sound crazy because we kind of assumed that this was only done once per 10 tails, but it dawned on me that this doesn't make sense given what Ishiki said to Code. He told him to feed Boruto or Kawaki to the 10 tails and consume the chakra fruit to upgrade himself and become a new Otsutsuki. He then said, and this is the most important part, that Code should go forth and devour planet after planet across space. Keep evolving until you become a peerless, unique existence, until you become a god. But how would Code devour multiple planets across space with just one 10 tails? The obvious implication here is that the 10 tails can be used again on different planets to absorb the energy of that planet. Now some would argue that this doesn't apply to the 10 tails in Jigen's dimension because it looks like a juvenile. But I would argue that this isn't a contradiction. The reason why this makes sense to me is because I believe that once a Ten-Tails produces a chakra fruit and the chakra it has left is then absorbed over time, the Ten-Tails will revert back to a smaller form. And thinking back to the Boruto manga, Code outright stated that the Ten-Tails was just a lump of chakra, and then the Ten-Tails proceeded to get smaller in size the more Clawgrams Code created using lumps of the Ten-Tails. Now a possible counter to this would be to say that if this Ten-Tails was indeed the Ten-Tails that Shibai used to consume his planets, wouldn't it also be the case that this Ten-Tails already consumed an Otsutsuki? So why would this Ten-Tails need to consume an Otsutsuki to turn into the God Tree? Well, the funny thing about this is that this was also hinted at in Shibai's backstory, because as stated by Amado, Shibai underwent multiple karmic resurrections in his quest to consume multiple planets. So this implies that every instance of a chakra fruit being produced, an Otsutsuki also needs to be consumed. So that's why Jura, or the original Ten-Tails, still needs an Otsutsuki to consume the planet. So all of that to say that the reason why these guys are so insanely powerful, to the point where they have to let this guy do whatever he wants, and even the cyborgs that possess the cells of a literal god can't stand against him, is likely because he also possesses the chakra of this god. Because even though the Ten-Tails in the past created multiple chakra fruits and passed on that power and genetic information to Shibai, it still retains some of that power, including Shibai's own power since he fed himself to that Ten-Tails multiple times. This also brings us back to Jigen, and I'm sure a lot of you guys aren't gonna like this, but this also implies that the reason why Jigen went to that Ten-Tails to go consume chakra from a juvenile Ten-Tails to fight Naruto is because that chakra is way more potent than a typical juvenile Ten-Tails. And it makes perfect sense because everyone was wondering, like, why would Jigen consume chakra from a juvenile Ten-Tails that hasn't consumed an Otsutsuki and hasn't consumed the chakra of a planet, and that should help him against Naruto, who fought Kaguya, who possessed a full-grown Ten-Tails that had the power of a planet. And the chakra was so potent to the point where Jigen instantly transformed into his strongest form with steam emitting from his body. So if the Shibai stuff is indeed true with this Ten-Tails, it would explain a lot. Now of course, I could be wrong, but we'll see. I also wanted to point out that there's this panel with Kaguya being surrounded by multiple god trees, and you also have the episode where Momoshiki is on a planet that has multiple god trees as well. So I'm not sure if this implies that even on a singular planet, if the planet is big enough, like you have to replant the Ten-Tails multiple times to get different chakra fruits. And this somewhat implies that they're using multiple chakra fruits, but I don't think that's the case because even back in Naruto, the Ten-Tails was able to separate itself from the God Tree because the God Tree was outside while the Ten-Tails itself was inside the Ten-Tails Jinchuriki, that being Madara and Jubito. So the most likely case is that the Ten-Tails is able to just separate itself from the God Tree and then proceed to be planted again to create another God Tree. Now, I could be wrong again, of course these are just assumptions, but this just came to mind when I saw Jura in the village from the leaks just lounging about and no one can step to him, not Boruto, Kawaki, who has the karma seal of Ishiki and he's going to get his limiters removed, and even Daemon, who some believe to be stronger than Ishiki himself, but for some reason, Kashin Kochi doesn't believe that he can stop Jura, so clearly that isn't the case. And of course, some people mention like the reflection ability and so on and so forth. And even if you assume that there's no counter to the reflection, which there might be, that means absolutely nothing since all that implies is that Jura can't kill him, not that he can kill Jura. So again, Jura is the current strongest in the series and there's no way around it. With that said guys, let me know your thoughts on the spoilers. Of course, the full spoilers is gonna drop next week, Monday probably, and you'll get your video on that as well. With that said guys, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.